for years, which is to say all of a sudden everybody needed a newsroom and everybody was going to be real time all the time. And I think that it's always good to sort of look at the benefits, the non-benefits of these things, to take it, take the brand into question and what's really good for the brand that you're working for. So I wanted to kind of talk about real time in a very practical manner rather than, this is the next big shiny thing and we should all get really excited for 2 weeks and then abandon it. So, okay, was that cynical, you guys? Yeah, okay. Our moderator here is Pete Deutschman from the Buddy Group. I'll just tell you a little bit about him. He's the chief Buddy, actually, and that is not Buddy Media, which is not Buddy Media anymore, by the way. So he launched the agency in 2006, and he's worked with tons of entertainment brands, also all sorts of other brands. What else was on there? Microsoft, all kinds of cool brands. He's worked on everything. Dell, Will.i.am, that's an entertainment brand. I think he has a lot to bring to the party on kind of the real-time moderation front. So we'll let you guys take it away. I'm going to walk behind you and leave. So anyway, here they go.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to talk a little bit about RTM, which is this cool new acronym that's being thrown around for stuff that we've already been doing for years. And that's cynical. So we as marketers obviously are needing to respond and find new ways to engage with our target audience and find relevance. It was pretty popular tweet, post, etc. recently done by Oreo that everyone now knows. And if you are in marketing, likely your CMO or CEO has come to you and said, why aren't we doing this? And you probably have 452 reasons why. One of them is probably not enough time of the day, not enough people, and we're here to discuss some of those issues that we face as marketers, as technologists, as content creators, and now in our new role as marketers, as editorial managers. And that's, I think, a big part of the challenge and also opportunity we have today in the marketplace. But I want to introduce the panel, at least have the panel introduce themselves very quickly. We'll start down at the end. And let's go ahead, Matt, and talk a little bit about you and your role, and specifically RTM, real time, and its relevance to what you do on a daily basis.
Sure. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Wurst. I oversee the digital community and social content team at 360i, which is a digital agency here in New York. I would say that the primary reason that I'm here is the Oreo tweet itself. That is a product of both our agency as well working with client Oreo. But that process, that real-time marketing philosophy is something that we've been working with Oreo for over a year to develop it and get it right. So I look forward to talking a little bit more about that, as well as how we work with some other clients to make that series of tactics really into a larger strategy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Cascio from 140 Proof. I work on the strategy side of our business, and we are a social targeting technology that looks at 2 billion social signals a day, primarily who people follow and keywords and hashtags appearing in their feeds in order to deliver highly relevant ad campaigns. So real-time marketing has been a real hot topic for us for quite some time, and we work very closely with brands and agencies to help craft interesting strategies to capitalize on buzz around events like the Super Bowl and CES and virtually anything else you could think of.
Good morning. My name is Gian LaVecchia. Excuse me. I am Managing Partner, U.S. Digital Lead at MEC, which is part of the Group M media agency. I'm on the panel today, I think, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've just long been a passionate supporter of content marketing and social marketing. In real time, all real time really is obviously just identifying that moment between social discovery and social engagement to publish compelling content. So a number of our brands are active social marketers, on the verge of embracing real time as a dimension of a broader marketing mix. But again, I'm up here just to add some interesting thoughts.
Good morning. My name is James Kolstad, Director of Mobile and Emerging Media at USA Network. So just to warn you, this is actually not my dominant hand. So if things get awkward or ugly up here, you'll understand. We're certainly interested as a television network in the concept of real-time marketing, real-time messaging. As you can probably imagine, we're always interested in how we bring our viewers to our live on-air programming. That is certainly something that is on the minds of everyone who's in television now, in the era of multi-screens and time-shifted viewing, et cetera. But I would also say that the whole concept of real-time is something that I think is evolving, and there's not necessarily one definition, and so certainly something that we can explore on this panel as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Guerre, and I'm the Vice President of Product at Topsy. Topsy's a real-time social analytics provider focused primarily on Twitter. And as Guy showed in his introduction this morning, creating engaging content isn't always that easy in 140 characters. And being able to have tools and data that help you to understand when real-time events come up or moments that are opportunities for engagement come up can help you with being able to engage more actively and in a more engaging way with your audience. And that's a lot of what we focus at Topsy, and so why I'm here this morning.
All right, so let's start there. With content that we're creating real time, right, which is to say that there's some sort of an event that's taking place, and we as a brand, and we'll come back to this topic around how do we prepare for it, but we as a brand or an agency need to be prepared to be able to enact and create compelling content, much in the same way that a PR agency was looking at creating the most appropriate byline to create to drive attention for a journalist. We as a brand need to do a lot of the same things. Let's talk a little bit about the value of that. You talked a little about measurement. Is this a brand? Are we supposed to be looking at this through the lens of a brand? From a branding perspective, engagement perspective, is this direct response? Does it have value in that equation? What is the equation that we should be looking at?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways to measure that value. I think one of the biggest ways is measuring how much your content gets spread and shared by your audience, and that your users engage with that content. There's a number of different metrics you can use to try and track that, but at the end of the day, if you get users that are fans of your content and engaging with your content, and that's growing over time, then you're doing a good thing. Topsy exposes a number of different metrics to try and follow that. First is growth of your fan base or follower network on Twitter, how much your content is getting tweeted or retweeted, as well as how many sort of impressions you're achieving for the content that you're sharing.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think, again, all of those engagement metrics are really powerful. Obviously, real-time creates a new opportunity as well to just elevate top-of-mind awareness, right? The whole point of this is timeliness and relevance, so I think that's an important dimension as well. Social relevance at a broader, more macro perspective as well is key. Yeah, I think all of the. Oh, actually, there's one more thought. There's been a lot of discussion recently in the trades about this return on ... right? And softer metrics like amazing and awesome, and it's really creative, innovative thinking. I do think eventually we're going to need to connect that to harder business metrics, and I'm not saying more transactional in nature. I'm not trying to dilute this or force it through a DR lens. But clearly, we're going to need to add a little bit more sophistication from that perspective.
Well, that's a new thought, ROI on social media. No one's really brought that up before. Anyways. John?
Yeah, and Pete, you had asked what is the equation that we should be thinking about, and I really think it comes down to understanding what that value exchange is. What do we as marketers or publishers have that we can provide to a consumer or a fan? In our case, what we're talking about here is content or conversation. That's kind of the currency that creates that. What we want in return is advocacy or loyalty or some degree of authenticity and respect. So evaluating whether or not we should be responding to everybody, because content and conversation really is as much a tactic for real time as anything. We have to understand what we should be investing and what we're ultimately going to get out of it, and that's what it comes down to.
So you bring up authenticity, and a lot of times we look at things and we say it's the overlap of authority and authenticity, right? And I think part of why we're up here as a panel is that authority for the first time in marketing's history is separated into two halves. You have the authority in the eyes of the consumer, right? And the authenticity in the eyes of the consumer, but authority in the eyes of the search engine, right? How do we create authority for a brand? So let's talk a little bit about that, because there's the short-term effect of having your post go viral, so to speak, and then there's the long-term halo effect of having discoverability of your brand. But there's also a negative side of that as well, right? We've seen a lot of brands trying to play in this space and failing miserably. We won't necessarily have to go through and call them out, especially because we're live streaming, and that would be really bad for business. But the idea is that you can also do some damage. So let's talk a little bit about authority and authenticity. What is the value? What do we have to look at from a brand's perspective in order to know whether or not we are being able to be authentic with RTM?
A couple quick thoughts, I would say. This idea of defining your authority to publish, right? So as a brand, as you're kind of going down this RTM path, you really do need to understand what your brand represents, what their voice is, and if you have a distinctive point of view, just clearly articulating exactly what that is. But ultimately, you just need to define what those guardrails are. Creatively, legally, topically, not all brands can engage in all types of conversations. And a great example, M&M's didn't get a lot of press. I'm not sure if this was 360i actually, but M&M's was responded to a high school senior that reached out to Kate Upton to be their high school prom date. And what M&M's realized in the picture was that on the back page of the Kate Upton People magazine or whatever it was an M&M's ad, and then the green M&M's gal reached out and kind of salaciously and in flirtatious manner said she's available, right? And that's just a clever way to play on kind of a brand engagement. They absolutely had that authority to publish and engage in a unique way.
Is that, and I want to come back to the panel, is that an example of RTM? And I keep using this acronym like everyone knows it and it's been around forever. It's really kind of doesn't matter, right? But the idea is that we're enacting to a real-time activity. Is that an example of a brand, a national brand, being able to go local through a real-time event? I mean, is that possible? Was there a possibility of a national brand actually engaging with a local high school sporting event as opposed to a Super Bowl ad? Is there relevance to that? Anyone know?
There's certainly relevance. Can you do it all the time? No. And that's why setting up some criteria to evaluate when and where you respond is important. And we talked about guardrails, setting those up in advance, making sure you have tested them and really evaluated what's going to work and what's not. I can tell you that with Oreo, as we developed those guardrails very early on, they evolved over time. And there are a lot of brands and individuals that would tweet and post on Oreo's Facebook wall, and you can't respond to also knowing what that brand essence is. Having the social tone of voice well established is fundamental, because then when we've all, we see the opportunity, we look back at our kind of strategic North Star and say, is this on brand, or are these the people we should be responding to? And then you just do it.
I think appropriateness factors into this a lot as well. I look at what Gawker Media did around Hurricane Sandy when their sites went down, having State Farm step up and say sites powered or covered by State Farm. That certainly wouldn't have been appropriate in the social space. You wouldn't have wanted a promoted tweet aligned with Storm Sandy, but in the right context, it was both appropriate and really made a big impact for State Farm and for Gawker. It was very responsive and reactive to the events of the time.
I think that some of what Matt is saying is really important with this, as far as figuring out those guardrails. You're not going to be able to do that just sort of in a meeting room planning. Part of that comes from actually executing this on a regular basis. And I'm sure some of those techniques and figuring out those guardrails, Oreo could be figured out well before the Super Bowl happened. And one of the things I like to think about is, not only these real-time events happening at the macro level, but happening at a micro level every day, something you can engage with and respond to. And it doesn't have to become a massive marketing opportunity for you, but if it's an opportunity that you're engaging and giving relative content to your audience and expanding that engagement with your user base, then it's a positive thing for your brand.
So let's go a little bit below the 30,000 foot level and talk about those guardrails, those guide rails. There's no such thing as an overnight sensation, right? We have the Oreo post that seemingly was an overnight sensation, and everyone was looking. There's no way that that's an overnight sensation. It just happened to be that somebody was really smart and ready and prepared, right? And knew what they could and couldn't do for the brand. So let's talk a little bit about that. The idea that there are many people sitting in a room developing documentation a year, 2 years out. Well, we're talking about social, right? Okay, 6 weeks out. And they're developing these documentation that basically says, here's who we are and here's who we are not, right? What kind of documentation and who is in the room? How do you deal with compliance in a highly regulated space? Can a brand that's highly regulated space be able to partake in some of these types of posts and these types of content? You know, like a pharmaceutical, as an example, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to some of the operational challenges that we face when we're first starting out, and aligning on what you're hoping to achieve, defining those objectives, is as important as actually nailing down the specific tactics and the guidelines that we talk about. You know, insights will drive a lot of where our strategy is built. Where is the consumer talking that we want to reach? So identifying the role of each platform. Does Twitter become a customer service channel where Facebook becomes more of just a conversational, equity building channel for us? So developing that architecture, that role of the platform is important. Once you've got that in place, making sure that you align with legal and PR and all of the through-the-line marketing partners that you have, whether it's other agencies or in our case with our client, that's getting on the same page is critical. And then measuring and optimizing as we go is probably more important than anything we do up front. Seeing what content works, how people are engaging and responding to what we've created. That then allows us to revise and optimize the strategies to continue to build on that success.
Anyone else on that? I'm surprised when we're dealing with brands today. I'm surprised how the communication comes back to the basics when it comes to the activity of actually posting something that hasn't been approved 24 hours prior, right? We're picking up the phone and we're calling the key stakeholders saying, this is the guide rails, this is what but we don't want to lose our job here. Can you please give me an approval on this? And who do we call? We send an email, we send a text, do you guys see this? Is this something that you guys are dealing with? Is there a tool or technology that you guys are using outside of picking up the phone and calling somebody for a final blessing and a final approval going on? Or are we alone in that? You guys seeing that at all? Bueller?
From a tool perspective, I don't know, beyond email or a mobile call, I'm not exactly sure. We're not using anything extensively there. But I do see an opportunity going back to those guardrails. If we're doing a phenomenal job of articulating what those legal, creative, and frankly, again, that brand point of view, because that's really the territory where we get it. It's a bit murky, right? You can define creative guardrails. You can define legal guardrails. But a point of view is not a voice, right? A point of view is a thoughtful perspective on an event, an issue, or something. So that's where I think the most scrutiny will occur. And generally speaking, that tends to be the brand director, the social director, or frankly CMO, depending on the organization.
And we work with a number of entertainment brands, TV networks, one of which is USA Network. And you can imagine that the conversation that takes place during a show there's just a lot of volume, the frequency is very high. So understanding what we can and cannot respond to, who we should and should not engage with, certainly it helps to have documentation in advance, but that's not always going to dictate everything. So there are technology partners that we use to help facilitate the collaboration in that case. I'll give a shout out to one of the sponsors. I know this is something that Shallot does. We work oftentimes in Oreo's case with a partner called Expion that helps just make sure everybody's aligned to get approvals and nothing gets published without the right people seeing it. in USA's case, it doesn't always work that way because there are hundreds of thousands of tweets during an episode of Psych. So we comb through those in real time and figure out who to respond to and why with the USA team.
So what is a brand that wouldn't be able to take advantage of this, or better said, shouldn't take advantage of this type of content? Is there an entertainment property or a brand within your network that just wouldn't be relevant, should stay away from it, and not even consider going this path?
You're talking specifically about real-time content?
Yeah, real time.
No, I mean, I really sort of can't imagine, any brand that couldn't find an opportunity to use real time in an effective way. No, I can't think of anything specifically. But I think that one thing that, certainly, we at USA Network and brands like us often, have to combat is this idea that that real time is really the province of sports and really the province of live events and really the province of reality programming, et cetera. And I think that one of the things that we've shown is that, in fact, that is not true, that there is a very significant role for real time messaging within a company and a network such as ours. I'll give you an example of something that we did, and I think this also speaks to some of the other issues that we've talked about on this on the panel so far, kind of getting back to things like authenticity. I think that ultimately when you have kind of a real-time marketing plan that's really rooted in what you know about your fans, what you know about your viewers, what really excites them, and the kind of stuff that really resonates with them. When you know that and you craft your real-time marketing around that, I think you really hit a very nice sweet spot. One of the things, an execution that we did recently for Psych was we actually had, in honor of the 100th episode of the program, we actually gave our fans the opportunity to vote and respond in real time to choose which ending they wanted to see. And this all happened live on air. This wasn't pre-planned. People were allowed to vote, to tweet, to go to USA Sync and lodge and vote there as well. And we calculated all of those in real time and then served up the fan-preferred ending for that particular episode. That's a real example of a live activation where we were obviously heavily dependent on live messaging, real-time messaging to get that word out there and to get people really excited. And it was incredibly effective. We saw a great boost in ratings. We saw an incredible amount of social traffic that night. And I think that's an example of how brands like USA are able to really activate, in a real-time way across programs that, again, I think, sometimes there is the, idea that that doesn't really work for, say, a scripted program, but I think we've proven that wrong.
And are you seeing brands coming to you looking to create that type of programming with you real-time in that way?
Yes, actually, that execution was a sponsored execution. It was sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts, and that was one of the things that got them incredibly excited, was that they were actually going to be kind of a part of this real-time live experience with us, and their messaging was on air, and their messaging was everywhere that we put our messaging. And so it made for a really fantastic, integrated, live feeling experience for us and for our fans and for the brand.
So continue with that and put you on the spot. So when I would imagine there's a bit of planning, a bit of creative development, everyone knows what's supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. What was the brand's position, or what kind of activity did they do real time during the show, et cetera, that maybe wasn't scripted, or was there anything that you saw?
Well, I mean, I think in these, nothing is scripted down to the nth degree. There's obviously a plan. We sort of know kind of generally what messages, we want to send out. We know we coordinate with, say, a brand sponsor in terms of what they might be doing in during that time frame as well. But I think kind of speaking to what Matt was saying a little bit earlier, you sort of have to respond to what your fans are talking about. And you can't go in with any kind of a rigid plan of action. You have to be very flexible, be able to find, sometimes you're surprised a little bit by what fans are getting excited about, and you then, in trying to continue to ride that flow and also direct that enthusiasm, you sort of have to find a way to get in there and I guess kind of play ball with the fans.
Anyone else on that?
I have a question, actually, just out of curiosity. So, and again, I think most of the room will agree, Twitter's most uniquely positioned to provide those real-time audience insights and giving you a really clear understanding of the velocity and the momentum that's happening around programming. Do you use any other platforms like Tumblr, since it's topical? It's obviously a different form of storytelling and engagement, but just curious.
We actually do use other platforms, across all our programs. We have Pinterest, we have Instagram accounts, obviously Facebook, obviously Twitter across all of our shows. I think that in this specific case of what we did for Psych 100, we focused on Twitter, and then we focused on our own kind of proprietary platforms as well. But I think that we're always looking, with every show, depending on what the particular strategy is around marketing that show, we switch gears. So we've had events where we've used Instagram to really drive photo taking and sharing as part of a larger campaign. So again, it has to be modular, it has to be sensitive to the fan community, and also sensitive to kind of what the show is about.
So what is the makeup of a brand that will succeed in this space? I'm not talking about the operational side of it, but what is the makeup of a brand that will succeed? I mean, let's start on the end and just go down the list. Because look, we talked about this a little bit in our little pre-chat, is that there's startups that want to do this, that see this as a silver bullet, and that are out there spending a ton of money where they should be spending money maybe on media, or think they should be spending. Get the point. What's your thought on it?
I think it really comes down to three core pillars of a business. The first is the ability to create meaningful content to the target consumer, whether that's highly visual on a platform like Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest, or even just being able to respond on a platform like Twitter. So the first is being able to create content that is consistent, whether it's big promotional tentpole campaigns or just everyday flow messaging. The second is an understanding of the best practices of each platform, knowing if there are 10 different ways to publish a photo to Facebook, what's the right way to do it so that it shows up the same way in mobile, on your timeline, and in the newsfeed. I think that's important. And the third really is, and you mentioned it, the amplification strategy, whether it's partnering with influencers who will build the credibility of your content and extend the reach through their network, or through a really good integrated paid media strategy. I used to say that if you need paid media to support social content, you're probably doing it wrong. I'm not sure you can succeed in social now without a robust paid media strategy. For big brands looking to get reach and engagement, or even small brands just trying to build relevance within the community.
Because the algorithms have changed to where you actually have to buy impressions now? Or
because the competition and the clutter in the space is so real that cutting through that clutter often requires something that will bring it to the top, whether it's from an algorithm perspective or just spending enough to get seen and get noticed.
Yeah, just to expand on that, I think amplification strategies tend to work really well around existing media campaigns and programs that you might be running. But also targeting is a really important aspect of this as well, to make sure that you're identifying the right people to deliver that message to, and make sure that you're hitting them not just at the right time, but hitting the right people with that message.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think a few other attributes of a kind of a well-positioned RTM brand. I hate to even say that, but a positioned brand that's positioned for success. Obviously, we've talked about being a modern brand, thinking like a modern brand, rather authentic and transparent as much as possible, and probably have a track record of success within the social engagement realm. Clearly, having a passionate and engaged audience base is key, right? Because if you have an audience of spammers, right, RTM's not going to work to any real level. Operationally and creatively nimble, I think, is really important, right? You need to be able to activate in real time, navigate through whatever complexities complexities exist within your organization, and then creatively make sure that you have the right type of thinkers on the business. And the other kind of wrinkle, and again, this is a topic that's had a lot of conversation around it, this notion of culture jacking, right? We don't want an environment where every brand out there is trying to connect to that same event. And I believe you mentioned that earlier. It doesn't have to be a Super Bowl event, right? It doesn't have to be the Oscars. It's celebrating those everyday moments where you can connect your unique point of view to that event in real time.
I think it comes down to the fundamentals of really knowing who your consumer is, really knowing what inspires them, what gets them, excited, and leveraging that in a way that, that feels real and feels like you are connected to that enthusiasm in a real, genuine kind of way. I know that's, again, very fundamental, but I think that it's easy to lose sight of that in kind of the thrills and throes of this new kind of real-time marketing world.
I agree with all of that. I think the brand that can't do real-time marketing is the brand that's not practicing it regularly. And as long as you're practicing it regularly, you're thinking about your audience, you're thinking about what's succeeding with them, you're measuring and you're iterating on all of that, then you can succeed at doing real-time marketing both on a regular basis and with bigger, larger macro events that can really be impactful.
With all of this, obviously, we started with what is the impact of, say, a media plan associated to this, right? If the ability to amplify it, should you find that lightning in a bottle, you want to keep going even further, or you want to give it a fair chance. The media mix, if you will, continues, and I use media loosely, right? It's the idea that content is engaging with your consumer wherever they are, whenever they are, however they want to be engaging, whether it be on the 1 foot mobile tablet experience or the 3 foot laptop, PC, desktop, or the 10 foot connected television. And I think it's interesting when you think about it from that perspective to understand that whole mix and how they work together is changing at a much more rapid pace than we've ever seen. And I've been doing this now for 74 years, so we've seen this evolve pretty quickly. Who owns it today? Should they be owning it tomorrow? And what's that viewpoint? And it being defined as content, engagement, real time. It touches media. It touches customer service. It touches sales if you're doing it right, trackability. And the answer cannot be an agency. So let's talk about, from the brand's perspective, who should own that?
I'm not allowed to talk, apparently, so.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think it carries across all of the items you mentioned. I think that there isn't a single owner of engaging with your customer. There isn't a single owner of participating in social media and optimizing your presence in social media. I think that marketing inside organizations should probably be leading the strategy, and that strategy should include ownership inside customer support, sales, the media team, the digital team, everything else.
And I would add to that, I do think, and this is potentially controversial, understanding who I represent, but over time, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these competencies, again, for sophisticated brand marketers out there, that all of these services in some form are housed with the brand, right? From a social marketing and content creation perspective, obviously they have their finger right on the pulse of exactly what drives and motivates audiences related to their brand. Agency partners are phenomenal, and I do see them obviously playing a significant role over the next 3 to 5 years. But beyond that, depending on how the marketplace evolves, obviously. But if we're seeing this trend continue, I wouldn't be surprised to see just more embracing this more internally at brands.
And is that because, based on what we see today, it's about creating compelling content that's relevant to the brand, that's obviously can move quickly, but it's something that's going to essentially show up in a feed as opposed to creation of some sort of engaging experience so that you don't need those resources in-house? Is that why you say that?
I think that's part of it. I mean, there's no question, I don't know if a majority, but a ridiculously high percentage of content is being consumed in some sort of curated feed at this point. So, appetite for disruption from a consumer perspective is obviously very limited. So you just want to make sure that you're you're probably going to bring talent in from agencies. I don't want to misrepresent that. You're probably going to bring in talent from the Topsys of the world. But at the end of the day, it's just understanding how your audience are going to consume this content and be able to pull the trigger, as quickly as possible. But speed is also dangerous, right? Being first is awesome, but speed kills as well. So again, just coming back to these themes of authenticity and relevance. We haven't really talked too much about relevance, but ultimately, from that disruption perspective, you just want to make sure it's a natural voice within each individual user's stream.
So in-house, we have the ability in-house to be able to determine relevance more than an external partner, right?
In theory, yes.
So is that the case today, or is that the case tomorrow? Trying to create controversy here.
Yeah. I think in part it's the case today, but I just wouldn't see surprise as marketing organizations become more sophisticated. And again, if RTM is a real viable platform, again, it's one piece of the broader marketing mix. We can't understate that rather. But yeah, I just think they're going to be better positioned to activate in the social realm moving forward.
What do you think, agency?
I think the line between marketer and publisher or media team is kind of disappearing. And right now, no matter whether you work at an agency or whether you work directly for a brand, having one central point of contact at the brand who can be the filter as well as proliferate the message back internally is critical. If we're dealing with 5 or 6 different people, it makes it much more challenging than if we just get to deal with one person who serves as that primary point of contact. Right now, I don't know that the majority of our clients, at least, have one central point of contact, but and certainly working with many agencies can be a challenge for any brand, for any client of ours. So the more that it can be consolidated, I think there are efficiencies there, but I don't see it happening in the next couple of years. I think maybe the 3 to 5 year plan may be right, and then just seeing what happens with the landscape and the marketplace itself will be really interesting, because there are efficiencies that come in working with an agency. The best practices that we get from, I probably look at 100 different Facebook pages on any given day. There are things we see that we can take from one and apply to another that someone working directly for one brand might not see now. If the tools help make that easier to identify later, then maybe things will change.
Anyone else on that? All right, so what's the one frustration that we have up here on the panel with regards to the space? Technology, perception, misperception, about what it takes to actually do this and do it right and be prepared. What's the one?
The idea of noise versus engaging content. That's, again, if this arena is going to survive, we really do need to scrutinize the caliber of content that's being programmed out there. And if it's, again, I'm not going to call out any individual brand, but if this is pure propaganda or shill, we're going to kill this before it gains any real momentum in the marketplace.
So we're in danger of that now.
I've definitely seen some examples of it in the market, yes.
Anyone else?
I think that one kind of frustration that we encounter a lot in our world is sometimes there's this idea that there's a silver bullet, that there is like a magical way to make this concept of real-time marketing work all the time. And I think that we sort of see on a pretty regular basis that it can be hit or miss, and it just takes a lot of missing, I think, ultimately to get the kind of hit that you want. And it requires finesse, and it requires experimentation, and all of those things. And implicit in that is that there's occasional failure, and that we do have to push back on this idea that there's some formula to how this gets done successfully all the time, and there just isn't, and I don't think there ever will be.
Isn't that why we love it? There is no formula. We can be up here on the panel talking like experts. There's no formula, right? We're doing our best. We're trying to learn from mistakes and apply success to other brands. I mean, that's, I think, one of the values that an agency brings. Do you guys agree? That you get an opportunity to work across multiple verticals, and you see something succeed in one space and then be able to apply it to another. And I think that goes for real time as much as any other aspect of driving traffic.
I think oh, there I am. So in other words, everybody's totally winging it. Oh, I feel so much better. So do we have any questions? Okay, hold on. And please say your name and title, and stand, even though I know who you are.
Rory Marr, Hillside Partners. Quick question. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Tumblr and Yahoo. I mean, do you see real-time opportunities there on the Tumblr platform, or is that more of like a Facebook type of social experience? And what does Yahoo bring to the table for you guys?
I actually do see real-time opportunities emerging from this partnership. I think last week Yahoo formulated a partnership with Twitter where they're going to start disseminating real-time tweets on their homepage. Obviously, that creates massive scale on a daily basis. Yahoo is still a very relevant digital brand, mass reach, 35+ million people visit their homepage every single day, so it's significant. Tumblr is fantastic, but obviously it's kind of focused more in that kind of that visual storytelling realm, which is great. I just believe the scale that Yahoo's going to actually bring it outside of that millennial realm that Tumblr's thrived in. It's either going to kill the brand, frankly, or make it exceptionally stronger.
I think the potential union of the two is really interesting, both from a content generation just monster in Tumblr, and there are millions of people creating millions of things every day, and if that's not real time, I don't know what is. And then Yahoo, which is still as large a media giant as there is, bringing together that reach and that just massive content is going to require some strategy, but I don't see Tumblr in any way inhibiting the ability, at least from a brand marketing perspective, any company or any brand, the ability to deliver content in a real-time fashion. If anything, it's getting easier, but you still need the infrastructure behind the team to leverage the platform the right way.
Unless I'm missing something, Tumblr doesn't provide anything of value that you can't otherwise get elsewhere. But I think what's interesting is the discoverability factor that Yahoo brings to that equation. And the question is whether or not that's going to end up cannibalizing search, the discoverability side of that from a black hat perspective, where we're going to start seeing a lot of search engine optimization specialists trying to jump on that bandwagon in order to see lift. And that will ultimately create really crappy content.
So you guys love this deal. Okay, so do we have any other questions? Okay, right there. Yes, thank you. Name and title, please.
Carrie Ann Morris, and I'm a marketer. I had a question kind of along the same lines, but with Google+. So when you guys are doing your strategy for social networking, how do you deal with that? Because it's totally related. And so do you do an SEO strategy along with your social networking strategy at the same time?
Ideally, yeah. I mean, the real benefit to Google Plus right now, while it may not be the most robust of content platforms, is that it does increase the discoverability of content within Google. Now, there are still many walls that separate Google and Facebook and Twitter content as far as search discoverability. You can't actually search for the Oreo tweet and have that come up as an independent, itemized piece of content. However, you can get to the Oreo Twitter feed. You can see many articles written about it, so it removes it one step. Arguably, the content that's being delivered in search, though, is more relevant to you. So developing a content strategy that encompasses both is critical. I'm just not sure Google Plus, from a community engagement perspective, is as mature as everybody else that we've talked about.
So,
But don't ignore it.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, we've got one more question in the back there. Thanks.
Lisa Cucinoda, social lead for Resolution Media. So I work in an agency, so my question would be for those of you on the panel that are also at agencies, how are you dealing with the off work hours aspect of real-time marketing within your companies? Because I find that is getting all these people together obviously is challenging, but dealing with the aspect of having to be available 24 hours a day to your clients, how do you sort of work around that?
Well, we're always on, and we have the benefit of having a number of people who can cover for each other and who have the passion to go beyond just work hours to keep their eyes and ears open. That doesn't always lead to the happiest of people who have to get in early if they're staying late. But rewarding and incentivizing people on the team through other ways obviously is important just from a managerial perspective. I would say in terms of representing a brand, having, depending on the scale and the size of the platforms, having a partner that can moderate and monitor for things that we may not necessarily look for in off hours, whether it's just customer service or product safety questions. We often work with some of the larger brands to find some of those things and then escalate it to us first. That can work just as easily in a real-time perspective as doing it ourselves. But making sure we're all aligned and have the same rules and guidelines is critical.
And I think this is an area tools can help as well. So instead of having to have people constantly monitoring what's going on, if you're able to tune your tools to alert you and proactively notify you, and you get those alerts set up in such a way that they're in off hours only alerting to you things that are of high enough relevance that you should be doing something about them, then you can save yourself a lot of that time and having to just constantly pay attention to the flow off hours.
I think to bring it full circle here too is to say that if real time is relevant and valuable to your brand, then you're willing to make the investment. And from an agency perspective, we went from this idea that a brand is a publisher to now brand as kind of a newsroom, has a newsroom component to it. And I think that as the news industry is changing, there's going to be some cues they're going to start being able to take from what we do in social and how we're able to respond and how we're able to cultivate. And there's going to be this new thing that's coming around that's a derivative of newsroom, because that's really all we know. But it's going to have to require that level of investment, which is multiple teams covering each other and being available 24/7 or some thereabout.
So, well, thanks, guys. You all look incredibly wide awake for people who are in RTM, I have to say. So please give them a round of applause and exit out that way, okay? Thanks, everyone. So I think I'm up to 6 Oreo mentions now. I'm going to start a drinking game. You can let... Right, oh, with milk, okay. Matt, who works for 360i, says we can do a drinking game with milk for Oreo mentions. Anyway, so I'd like our next group to come on out while I introduce our moderator. Our moderator is an FOM, a friend of Media Post, Dr. Augustine Fu. I love having doctors on stage in case anything bad happens. He's here. He actually has, I think, the only Italian